So just starting this, I wanted to share this picture of David Cook. He's one of the best educators the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Alberta has ever had, and a very good friend of mine. When we began creating this new medical school in Kathmandu, Nepal, he and I began as the only people doing that, and then ultimately grew to about 16 people working on that. Yeah, now I'm going to go over here, and Ishita Moghe is going to interview me. So, get us situated here. All right, that looks close enough to me. Okay. All right. So I think I've got all my props and everything. Anyway, if we need something, I'll have to dash over there for it. But this is really what I was missing last time. I know it seemed odd when Joshua interviewed me that I knew so little about this dialysis task force article, but it had literally been 25, 26 years, and so I wonder what was that all about. So I have it with me now. So anyway, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to interview me. I think we always get better footage that way. When I just talk, I can get into very arcane areas where nobody's interested in except me. Whereas if other people ask me questions, it kind of keeps it in the mainstream. So that's the idea. So, do you want to start off?
Sure. So my first question was about this paper. Basically, could you describe the protocols that are set forth?
Yeah. So the idea had to do really with what happens when an earthquake occurs. So first of all, believe it or not, the U.S. Geological Survey keeps track of earthquakes around the world and has a notification system. Originally it was phone calls, and now it's higher tech things. So one of the things the article deals with is that, how people find out that an earthquake has occurred. And then it talks about how things proceed from there. The task force national key persons are expected to establish communications with the Minister of Health, Minister of State for External Affairs, or comparable officials in their countries. So they're supposed to put in place those interactions that would require governmental intervention, and then the idea is making it easy for the people to get into the country that they're going to. So to have the nationality, the passport number, all that sort of things of all the task force members that are going, so that the immigration of the country where they're going to already knows about them and to know what supplies they are bringing. So the idea there is that the chaos that occurred in the Armenia earthquake should not ever be allowed to occur again, where basically the attempt to help created a second disaster worse than the first. So one wants to avoid that, and by having the country where you're going to provide the help have good information about who you're bringing, what you're bringing, all those sorts of parameters, it makes it possible to actually get there on time. And not getting there on time was the usual defect in most of the early attempts. Like the New England Journal article that was written after the 1988 Armenia earthquake was written by somebody who didn't get there for like 9 days after the thing. You know, it's like the time to save people is earlier than that
Yeah.
golden period. So, and that was actually the big way in which we succeeded. Turkey has a lot of earthquakes, so we already the task force was notified, had attempted to get into earthquake zones in Turkey before. So when the really big quake occurred in 1998, everything was in place. We knew exactly what to do. We got there on time. We brought the mortality down from 50% to 15%. So 35%, reduction.
That's amazing.
And really saved a lot of lives. So the article, I was talking about the status of countries. There's this country list with different earthquakes, and for instance, it just talks about Skopje, Macedonia. It doesn't say former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia, which was at that time the official name of the country, which nobody liked. So that's that table 1. Then there's another table showing who the primary contacts in all the various countries are. And you would think, since I was leading this for a number of years, that Canada would be in the forefront. But it's funny how cautious and kind of frightened Canadian physicians were about just telling their boss that they were picking up to fly off to some third world country to save people after an earthquake. Most Canadian physicians thought that they wouldn't have a job to come back to if they did that. Canadians are very polite. You don't just leave your job, it's it's reliable. You're there every morning, people look around and you're there sitting where you're supposed to be, and Canadians are very proud of that. So actually we had only 2 or 3 people in the whole country who actually said that if an earthquake occurred tomorrow in a place that needed them, they could actually go. So
That's a surprising
kind
number.
of frustrating.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So the other thing that's kind of mysterious about this whole disaster relief task force thing, and it's humorous. The reason this comes about, the ISN has a web page that has the latest information about what their disaster relief task force is doing. But the URL of that web page is so long that you could never put it in any document without the URL getting broken. There'd be a line break and it would spread over, 2 or 3 lines. So people click on the thing and it doesn't work. Or maybe the first part works, so you go to some other obscure web page that has nothing to do with the task force. So, and as you may know, there are these URL shortening services, but malware providers have really gotten into them, and so it's hard to get a shortened URL for long URLs that's not going to actually affect people's computers. So therefore, although the ISN Disaster Relief Task Force is still quite active, people really don't know about it because they don't know that page, and,
Yeah.
and it's not a very high profile. I mean, if you start with the main page of the ISN, it would take you a long time to find where is this disaster relief task force page.
Yeah.
So that's the
So,
answer there.
Can you tell us a little about what recently the ISN task force has been doing?
Yeah, so some of it is not so much earthquake-induced kidney failure. That obviously happens. But like there was an earthquake in Iran in November 2017. And so the latest listing on that ISN Disaster Relief Task Force page has to do with interruption of services for the patients who are already receiving dialysis. They also have needs. It's not just the new patients, but the patients who have chronic renal failure or receiving dialysis, and the earthquake interrupts the power and stuff to the place where they've been being dialyzed. So they also need to be dialyzed. So that's what that latest entry deals with is not only the crush injury induced new cases of renal failure, but the chronic renal failure patients, looking after their needs too. And the entries right below that have to do with the European refugee crisis that also affects Turkey and that region, and what to do when there are refugees, sort of people without a country, people lacking normal citizenship who need to be dialyzed. So those are some of the kind of modern issues that the ISN task force has been dealing with.
Another question I had for you was regarding an article in Transplantation Proceedings,
Right.
Figure 3 of the gold medal article.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that comes. It's actually that figure kind of evolved over many years. I first became aware of Dunbar's number, this idea that each of us can keep in our minds about 150 people. They don't have to be people that we know face to face. They could also be, celebrities or people that have influenced us. That you can only have a real feeling for about 150 people at a time. If you meet somebody new and they're really significant, they need to be included. You have to kick out somebody else because your cerebral cortex has a limit of how many people you can sort of have empathetic or highly significant friendships with. So I got the idea of putting together a list of the people who had influenced me. And it came out to about 150, and that was kind of cool. So in 2014, I shared that on Facebook. It's not as revealing as you might think. I've had some line, just Solez families. I didn't really say who these people were, but anyway, I knew who they were. And so that's kind of where it started. And then I realized that I needed this critiqued. So I had the students, people like you, critique the list, particularly the celebrity part of the list, because you may claim that you're significantly influenced by some famous person just because you think it'd be cool if you were, but you're really not, So Michael Jackson was on the list in 2014, and the students said, as far as they can tell, I'm not influenced by Michael Jackson. Sure, I know who he is, but Michael Jackson's themes, and my themes don't really line up at all. So I got rid of Michael Jackson and some other people like that. It was very useful to get it critiqued. And the non-celebrity people, we contacted each of them and asked them if they were willing to be on the list. And as happens with any normal human interaction, actually everybody said yes. Some of the people were kind of suspicious, what's this all about? What are you going to claim about me? I'm not claiming anything, I'm just claiming that you influenced me, that's all. And are you willing? So I contacted all of the non-celebrity people on this list and asked them if they were willing to be on the list, and they said yes. So then I decided to do the celebrity list only and update that, because I think my own thinking about which famous people influence me changes with time. I get bored with some of them and get interested in new ones. So I updated that list actually in early 2017, and then when I won that gold medal award with Lorraine Rackison, we had to write an article accepting the award. And actually what I said in Barcelona accepting the award did stand the test of time. It was the kind of thing that had a lot to do with politics, and in the era of Donald Trump and stuff, politics changed pretty quickly, and I realized that although it was good at the time and people appreciated what I said, I needed a new theme for the actual written article. And Lorraine said, "Can we do that?" I said, "Certainly we can." What is history for if not so we can revise history, and who knows what we really did, what we really said at the Barcelona meeting, but this is the story that we're going to tell about Dunbar's number and how these various people influenced my life. So I started to put together that timeline, going from the birth date of Homer Smith, who's the first person who interested me in the kidney. He's a very famous kidney physiologist and philosopher who wrote the book From Fish to Philosopher. And he's not a very fetching looking guy, though. Actually, I started out with a picture of him. Boy, that's going to be a downer, this important graphic has such a geez, So then I thought, well, Louis Armstrong sort of comes next, and he's kind of a cool looking guy. So anyway, he's the first picture that you see. We in that 204 year trajectory, we start talking about Homer Smith, but the first picture in that actual graphic is of Louis Armstrong, and obviously, I played the trumpet when I was growing up. I've been interested in jazz for a long time, so Louis Armstrong. And you might say, well, okay, so from Louis Armstrong to Mallory Chipman, it kind of is like that. She is interested in some of the same kind of jazz that Louis Armstrong performed, and so there's nice kind of transition there. And so the whole graphic that puts together like celebrities and my medical mentor, Dr. Robert Heptonstall, it all wouldn't make sense if there were no connections between the medical and arts part of my life. But recent events show that there obviously are. Like when I went to see iconic poet, singer, songwriter Leonard Cohen in November 2005, he and I talked about medicine a lot. I thought he'd be so bored with me and want to kick me out the first 10 minutes because I'm such an incredibly boring guy and he's such a cool guy, and we just wouldn't hit it off. But that's not what happened. We just started talking, kept on talking. He was fascinated with the medical things. So I told him a lot about the Banff classification of kidney transplant pathology, and particularly about borderline changes. And when you're not sure if it's this category or that category, and how controversial the use of borderline changes is. And I was thinking, boy, what a waste of this famous guy's time, because we're spending so much time talking about this. Okay, so about 9 months later, he's sitting at his kitchen table, Leonard Cohen's kitchen table, the same place where we talked during that visit. And he writes this poem that has the word borderline 5 times. My doctor says I'm borderline, blah, 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 borderline, blah, 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 borderline. And the funny thing is, he was a person who often worked for a very long time on the final version of songs, 10, 15, 20 years. And so you might wonder why that is. But in this case, it's clear why it is. That quite honestly, and I know it sounds arrogant to say that, but the poetry, the lyrics that he was writing at his kitchen table in early 2006, after meeting me and talking about borderline, just wasn't very good, wasn't very interesting. But it became the best song on his final album, became the song Treaty, which is a fantastic song. I wish there were a treaty we could sign. I don't care who takes the bloody hill, blah, blah, blah. It's really about the kind of issues there are between any two human beings, keeping an important friendship going and stuff like that. So it's just really exciting. That's what happened. And during that 10-year period of those 5 uses of the word borderline, he got rid of 4 of them. So this final wonderful song has lyrics very similar to the first thing that he wrote, but just much better, much more engaging, much more relevant to the lives of most audiences. And so that kind of empowers me to think that putting my musical, poetic, and medical life together in one graphic kind of makes sense, because I know that those sides of me make me a better physician, make me a better teacher. It adds a facet that's surprising. It brings lateral thinking in to a lot of medical questions. I think all of that is useful. So yeah, I think that figure 3 is very, very surprising, but it also contains so much explanatory notes below. I think, wow, I wanted this explained, but I don't know if I wanted this detail of the explanation. That's like amazing, yes, yeah. So we'll see what happens, but I think one of the cool things is that I created a playlist for these videos, and it's been nice to see how much that playlist has been accessed. It's only existed for the last 5 days, 6 days, and a lot of people are visiting it. So I think that if figure 3 were completely boring to almost everybody, then maybe that wouldn't happen. So it's kind of intriguing, I think. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but anyway, that's my answer. Yeah.
I also wanted to talk to you about the stories you had about David Cook and Shauna Panja.
Yes. So I think actually each of us, you and me, we have also maybe at least once in our lives done things where we succeeded where probably other people wouldn't. I think just recently, like today or in the last hour, you've succeeded in making a proposal of basically a kind of thought thought experiment for a course that and you succeeded in getting that proposal accepted. And I think that's really, really remarkable. It'll be of very great impact, and this has to do with a human cell atlas, which I think will be a very important factor in medicine, all kinds of medicine. Probably a lot of the audience listening to this have no idea what it is, but in 5 years everybody will know, you know, so that's very important. Similarly, probably the only remarkable thing I've ever done is in 97 when the NKF Cyber Nephrology entity began. This had been visioned in 96 by the National Kidney Foundation. And I sort of learned about it. I said, hey, well, I'm already doing it. Why don't you let me lead it? And they just said yes. And so when you think about each of those things, like the way that you pitched your proposal, probably they didn't have other people giving them that kind of pitch. You know, it's not like there are 100 people lined out outside the faculty store. Yeah. And similarly, I think the early days of the internet, it was hard to find physicians who were really passionate about internet-based communication. So it's not like they had other candidates. They didn't. I think they did this visioning. They said, "Oh, great, we have a plan, but we don't have a clue who's going to do this." And then, so I think that's why it happened. Yeah. So David Cook, he and I knew each other quite well, and we had a lot of common interests. He died in 2009, and it was amazing. It was a very sudden death. He died of a heart attack on a Sunday, and on the preceding Friday, we had such a significant conversation. I mean, he asked me all sorts of probing questions, and we planned giant projects. It was exciting, and I felt afterwards, wow, that's like such a memorable phone call. So on Monday, his secretary calls me and says, "I'm terribly sorry, but I have to cancel your lunch with David Cook." I said, no, you can't cancel. She said, "No, David died yesterday." But anyway, so it was a very dramatic thing, that side of it. So earlier, maybe about a year and a half before that, David Cook and I were both going to Kathmandu, Nepal, where we helped create a new medical school devoted to rural health and social responsibility of medicine, selecting medical students in sort of a different way so that they will stay in the country, so that they're dedicated. The usual fashion would be you go to medical school in Nepal, you go to some rich country and never come back, and just send some money home maybe, but that's it, right? So we were trying to create something different. So we went there different ways. I forget what his route was, but he had originally planned to go through China, and he had sent his passport to the Chinese embassy to get a transit visa, and it didn't come back in time. He had the foresight to photocopy his passport before he sent it in, but anyway, that's all he had was a photocopy of his passport. And I'm looking at what he's holding in his hand, and it's a photocopy. I thought, this is never going to work. I mean, it's the modern world, you know. It's like everybody's suspicious of everybody else, and they're not going to let you in. But he just calmly looked the person in the eye and did a lot of nodding, and he's got this cool sort of British accent and the whole thing. Like, this could be a movie. Wow, this guy is exactly what we need in the country. I'm sure the customs guy was thinking, yeah, wow, he's so interesting, you know. And so he just said, fine, and stamped the photocopy as if it was a passport and waved him through. He actually got through quicker than I did. I had a real passport and everything. It took at least 30 seconds or a minute longer for me to get through. And so I was so impressed by that. And I realized one's demeanor, one's way of carrying yourself, whatever you want to say, the view of yourself you present to the world can be so effective sometimes that you actually don't need anything else. Yeah, so Shauna Pandya, we had a very complicated evening, one of the most socially complicated evenings I've ever been a part of. First, it started with the rich man, poor man dinner supporting international health and the Faculty of Medicine, and then overlapping that was a Back to the Future costume party at the Art Gallery of Alberta. And they really needed to know who was coming because the mayor was really keen on this and was planning to come with his people and so on. So there were going to be some important people there who needed to be protected, and so they didn't want riffraff. Yeah. So anyway, I got 3 tickets for myself and for Shauna and for Shauna's boyfriend. Let her know that. Now, she's a normal young person. Normal young people, their phones go dead. I mean, some of it's bad, but some of it's good. It's a good excuse for things. And, I wanted to meet you, but my phone went dead, stuff. So anyway, her phone went dead. So I was, sending her all sorts of messages. Are you here yet? All these kind of things, which didn't really matter because she had no way to receive the message because her phone was dead. So she got there like an hour and a half before I did because I was still at the rich man, poor man dinner. And she just explained that I was holding tickets for the two of them. And she and her boyfriend looked like they're exactly the demographic that this party needed. These are the people. This is what we were waiting for, And so they just sort of waved them through. Yes, that's fine. We'll talk to Dr. Solez when he gets here. So I rush in an hour and a half later. Did Shauna Pandya come? I've got her tickets. He said, yeah, we just let her in. I said, you just let her in? Yeah, we just let her in. Oh, that is so cool. So yeah, she she's been to space. She's been to International Space University, Singularity University. She started her own company. She's into all sorts of martial arts. She's high level black belt in various martial arts things. And she's an awesome public speaker, so she's sort of like a physician with 1,000 other facets. It's like, wow, you can pack all that into the life of a physician. Yes, you can. So yeah, no, she's an amazing person. So that was another example. I think both of those encounters, I just don't have the personal qualities to have carried that off. They would have said to me, well, the mayor's coming, and I don't know. We want you mingling with the mayor, man. I don't know. You can come to some other party, or, you come back when you have a tickets, or, yeah. So, yeah, anyway, I think those are, you meet different people every day, and you would think that there's one metric. Like in China, they're planning to rank all their citizens, right? So you have a rank, and that determines how important you are to the people running the country. It's just one number, but you realize life isn't really like that. And people have all sorts of different capabilities, characteristics, and so experiences like that with Shauna and David Cook re-emphasize that to me. It makes you sort of humble. No matter what happens, you still know there are people who are much more skilled at some human interactions than you are. And it's a good idea to always keep that in mind. You may need to call on those people to help you sometime. So other questions?
I think that's all the questions I have for you today.
Okay, well that's great. Well, thank you very much for the interview. So this will be the 17th video in our playlist, and I just think 17 is going to be kind of a magic number for a while. I don't have any ideas about adding more at the moment, so that 17 will I think be quite satisfying for people. At least that's what I think. We'll see what the people out there think. Okay, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.